Hey everybody, so I thought I would share with you today some more play with the mermaid markers, and I wanted to do a comparison between Jane Davenport's new mermaid markers and some of the other watercolor markers that I have in my stash. So I'm just going to start off with the mermaid markers, and that is her cute little pouch that I just picked up at Michael's recently. So as you can see right off the bat, the colors are very vibrant, and you'll see that even more so when they start going down on the paper. And the type of paper I'm using is Canon watercolor paper. It's 140-pound cold press, and I'm using the rougher side that has a little bit of texture to it, and that's just my personal preference with watercolor paper. I usually like to work on the textured side. So it has a really nice array of colors, and after working with these for the past several days, I really like these markers. Now I'm just showing you some of the other ones that I'm going to be going through. So there's the Letraset Aqua markers, and there are a couple of homemade markers, and I'll explain those a little bit later. And a couple of other brands that I have are Tombow and Marvie Le Plumes. So those are the longer ones that I just set down there. So I'm starting off with Jane's color Starfish. This is a really pretty hot pink, and you'll kind of see with the way that you use the marker, and I give it a couple of squeezes in this case to really show you how vibrant the color is, like at full capacity. And the nice thing is that you can have that really nice, strong, vibrant color, and then you can always dilute it with water if you want to have a paler pink. And it's almost a cherry red. But then where it sort of dilutes out on its own, it will become more of a hot or pale pink depending on how much water you add. So now I'm just going to paint over some of the starfish and just kind of give you an idea of how it reacts with water. So these are very water reactive, and they're so much fun to play with the water and just kind of see what different effects you can get. So one cool thing that I notice is that when I let her markers dry overnight, you can still go in the next day and pick the ink back up with water, so it will react to water even if it's super dry. So what I did there was I just painted a little square wash. Just wanted to show you what the color does when you paint into it, into water. Now I'm just adding a little more, just kind of dropping some in. And depending on how much ink you use to start with, you can still get a really strong, vibrant color even if you add lots of water. So this color I believe is Deep Sea, and it's a really deep purplish blue. So just kind of going in, doing some of the same type of exercises with this one. You can see that violet starts to pop out when you add water. And I'll just say right off the bat that these are my favorite brush markers that I've ever worked with, and I have Copics, Prismacolor, you'll see some of the other ones being tested out, and I think there's a few reasons for that. The color that I'm testing out right now is Beach, and I just gave it the barrel a couple of squeezes to get a little more of the color going. So the nib itself, the brush, is very high quality and strong, and it says in the packaging that you can refill these once the ink runs out, and I will more than likely be repurchasing the markers themselves, just you know, a whole new pack, and then I can always keep the ones I have now and turn them into Aqua markers, or even try them out with maybe some different inks. But I would definitely spend the money again to get the entire pack, just because I really not only like the brush marker themselves, but the colors and the way that the inks work are just fantastic. So I'm just showing a little bit of layering. So I layered some reef, which is a deep brown, over some of the deep sea. I'm adding a little bit of seaweed right now. And something really cool that I noticed too with her markers is that you can layer, as you can see, and create some really cool effects and kind of do whatever you like with the colors, and you know, play around with the water and see how the colors interact with each other. Using some spiced marmalade distress marker. So one difference between the mermaid markers and a lot of other watercolor markers is that the mermaid markers are single-ended and these are double-ended. So mostly whenever I've used distress markers, I use the brush nib, and it does have a fine point, I guess you would call it a bullet tip on the other side, but it is the ink that it will lay down with the pen side, is really small, so it's good for not necessarily like the kind of calligraphy style writing, but maybe if you wanted to write, you know, small letters and things like that, it'll keep it really neat and tidy. So I'm just going through some of the same types of tests where I add water drops, and of course, as a lot of distress products are, they are also water reactive, and I'm doing some color blending. And so I use Spice Marmalade, Dusty Concord, that's the one that I'm using right now, which is sort of a faded purple color. And the red is Barn Door. And I'll have to look up the name of the blue one that I'm using right now. I'm not sure. I just grabbed an assortment of colors. So as you can see, and I have some of the older distress colors, I don't have their newer ones that are more vibrant, like Mermaid Lagoon and Abandoned Coral and some of the other colors that they came out with, I believe, last year. So now I'm just writing out that that's the distress marker. And so right away you can see that Jane's colors are way more vibrant. But to be fair, Distress did come out with, I believe, 12 more vibrant colors. So now I'll show you the Letraset Aqua markers. These are also double-ended. So they have a bullet tip and a nice big fat brush end. And I do really like these markers as well. They're a little bit cost prohibitive for me personally. That's why I haven't run out and bought any more. I happened to get this set of 5 and I found them at Tuesday Morning. They just had them bagged in these little plastic bags, so I don't know if they were just overstock. But this is a navy blue color and they're fairly new. I've only had them maybe 2 or 3 months. So I'm just showing how they react with water also. These pens are still very juicy because they're still pretty new. The Distress markers I've had longer, probably a couple of years. So they would be nice to use with Jane's colors. Now I'm just doing some of the spray water marks on the Distress ink. So here are some close-up photos of the 3 different markers that I just showed you. So Jane, Distress markers, and the Letraset Aqua markers. So I just wanted to show you a couple of paintings that I did with the mermaid markers. This first one is finished. And the fairy I'm still working on, and as soon as it's finished I'm going to upload a video and add a link here, and there'll be a link to the mermaid video in here as well. Okay, so now I'm showing you 3 other markers. This is the Spectrum Aqua markers, and they are also double-ended. They have a thick chisel nib, and to be fair, I did switch out the other nibs. They do have a brush end for the Spectrum Aqua, and at that time they didn't have brush ends in Spectrum Noirs, and so I went ahead and bought some of the Aquas and switched out their brush marker with the Spectrum Noirs. So I'm really only going to be showing you the chisel nib for these. So these are pretty juicy, and they do react pretty differently with water, and I believe they come with a blender pen that helps you blend different tones. Just like I'm showing you, I tried some of the same types of tests. Now I did use the smaller bullet tip to do a little bit of doodling, but one thing that really surprised me with the Spectrum Aquas was that they were the least reactive with water, and I don't know how well you can see there. You'll be able to see in the pictures that I upload a little bit better, but it leaves this stain, the original mark that you make, and it is one major difference is that it leaves that original mark so that it's harder to blend, and possibly with the blender marker you could get better results, but I did notice that the paper was already starting to pill a little bit with just the amount of marker and water that I was using there. So, and then I'm just marking it there so that we know that that is Spectrum Aqua. So next up are the Tombos. These are also double-ended, and they have a fairly thick brush end, and then they have like a medium-sized bullet tip on the other side. And these are still pretty juicy, and I've had them a couple of years now. And I have to say I haven't used these a whole lot, but it's still impressive that they did not dry out in the last couple of years, especially since I live in Arizona. So the colors are pretty vibrant, and unfortunately, I don't have more colors to show you, so I can't show as much of the layering and things like that. I want to show you how you can get kind of a nice goldenrod color mixing the red tone and that deep yellow color. So you can definitely do some good blending with the Tombos, and I'll show you how they react with water. So that's just the dripping, and then if you paint onto it, it's much more responsive and definitely performs better than the Spectrum Aquas. And you can definitely pick up some of the ink and then go off with the wet brush and draw extra little marks and shapes and things like that. So that's pretty cool. So this is the Marvy La Plume, and as you can see, they're very similar in shape and size to the Tombos. They're also double-ended. The only difference is that the La Plumes have a very, very thin pen tip that is on the other side from the brush side, so they're more similar to the distress markers in that way. And again, unfortunately, I don't have too many of these to show you. I only could find 2 colors, and I've had these about as long as I've had those Tombos. I bought them all around the same time, so a couple of years. They haven't seen a ton of use. Definitely the Tombos seemed to be juicier, but that could be for a number of reasons. I don't know. You know, the Marvy La Plumes could have gotten a little bit more use, or they could have dried out a little bit more. It's hard to say. And the only other color I had to show you in the La Plumes was a really pale gray. So it barely shows up on the paper, but I did want to at least give you 2 different colors to kind of get a sense of the La Plumes, and then you'll be able to see close up better in the pictures. So that really pale gray color, even though it's not showing up super well on film, I do remember doing a lot of shading with it, and it, you know, it's blendable with the other colors. I can remember there I'm doing the little spritz water test. I can remember using that, you know, some of the paler shades for shading and kind of drawing out darker colors and things like that. So as for water / dye based, this is the last of the collection that I'll show you. And this idea I actually got from Jane Davenport herself. Before she came out with the mixed media line, I had bought one of her classes, and she had a whole collection of aqua markers that she filled with Jacquard. I'll have to get the exact name for you. I have some of them. Oh, it's Dynaflow. They're called Dynaflow, so they're dye inks, and so what I'm showing you is just an assortment. Some of them, some of the India inks, unfortunately, that I put into aqua markers dried out the brush part and even clogged it to the point where I couldn't use them anymore. But for the most part, especially with the Dynaflows, these are a nice alternative, and you know, you can use them similar to the way that you would use water markers, where you can play with water and thin them out. You can do some layering. So for the most part, I just am using the Pentel Aqua brush, and I believe that last one that I use is the Tim Holtz water marker. So this is what I was primarily using before I got the mermaid markers, as far as adding a watercolor effect to paintings. And like I said, this is a decent alternative, although now that I have the mermaid markers, and hopefully Jane will be coming out with some more colors, it sounds like she possibly will be in the future, they're a lot easier to work with, and you can kind of know what to expect a little bit more. As far as doing your DIY markers, it's sort of hit or miss. It's not a bad way to go. One thing though is that with Jane's mermaid markers, you can use a coupon and you get the 12 markers. I got them for $20 because they were half off. And when you think about 12 aqua markers for $20, if you were to make your own, aqua markers are not cheap. Like the Pentel Aquash is, I used to get it on Amazon 3 for around $14, and then you have to buy the ink. So that's something to consider. Just showing you some close-ups of the Tombows, Marvy Le Plume. And I did want to show you that really pale gray Watercolor, and those are the DIY markers.